can change it in Twitch live. So it's potentially we could be live here in a minute. just so you're aware.
Should I go comb my hair? I'll keep my mouth shut.
I obviously got dressed up for this.
Even me.
Oh yeah, so we're live right now. So go to Twitch.
All right, let me see myself. Hello, self.
Can you see yourself?
I'm seeing an ad.
Oh yeah, sorry. You know, I'm so big time.
I hope it's worth it.
Now
on Prime Video.
Oh man. So people, we just went live. So there's like, I didn't put any like, hey, announcement or anything. We're just jumping in here with trying to do SuperPosition podcast. What episode would this be?
This would be episode 8.
Nice. So it's actually just one episode off of what my stream episode is. So this is going to be really confusing because I always title my streams episode whatever. So now it's episode 7, SuperPosition podcast, episode 8. The confusion begins. That's what.
Yeah, I think that's how we keep people on their toes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's great. That's wonderful.
Funny. So just chatting. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here.
Love it.
Nice.
So with that said, let's get Craig in the loop here.
Craig, our friendly bot.
Our neighborhood bot.
Craig.
Let us put this. Okay, good. We'll see.
Everyone's seeing how the sausage is made right now.
Yeah, this is great. Welcome.
Super awesome.
Yeah. Love it.
Hopefully people can hear you. I think they can. It looks like it based on
see.
based on my desktop. It looks like everything's rocking and rolling.
Yep.
So, all right, Craig, I got to get in the podcast thing, don't I?
Very strange.
What?
Let me see here.
No Craig?
I'm just going to do... No, Craig. Craig is there. Craig is alive. Just want to try this.
He's alive.
All right, is this in stereo now?
Yes.
All right. Was it in stereo before?
I doubt it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think so. Let me see.
It sounds a little different. I told you, like my noob ears aren't always going to be able to.
We'll need to figure that out at some point. I think it's only in mono right now, but that is what it is. All right, so I'm just going to go close the door, and let's see, is Craig in here? Not yet.
Robot Craig. There we go.
It helps if I'm in the right channel.
Get it, Craig. Oh, now we're double.
Oh yeah, just change your audio and output.
So wait, which one should it be?
I'm using Zoom for this one, so you can disable Discord if you want.
So I just changed it to whatever.
Yeah, to anything else.
Let's see if that works. Still not working. What'd I do wrong?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Let me figure it out here. I just changed my input to anything else, right?
No, the input is whatever your microphone is now, but your output you changed to something else.
Great. Let's see if that Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah, man, my mic is like.
So I'm getting some great feedback here.
Oh, nice. Totally cranked up on Twitch.
So wait, let me just see something here.
See if I can get that back to a normal, reasonable. Woo! All right, that better? Are you getting feedback there?
So you're on. So I can't hear you because every time let me just try this. All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, go to your Discord settings. What output device did you select there?
I changed my output. So it needs to be my input's different or my output's different?
So your input needs to be whatever you're using for the microphone now, but your output needs to be something random, something that's not turned on or plugged in, like a speaker or something.
Yeah, okay. Does that work?
This is fine. That's perfect.
Oh, that's
terrible.
That's terrible because I can hear it in my.
Or you can't hear that one. Can you hear this one? Can you hear this one? How's that?
Okay, that's perfect.
Great. All right, good. Hey, fifth time's the charm. You know what they say.
Yeah, I know what they say.
Awesome.
Right, let's see here. I just want to take a look. Okay, cool. Let me close the door. BRB.
All right. Good luck. May the force be with you.
Okay, cool. Lovely.
Okay, so I was looking at your shirt. You know, I told you I went to bed really late, and I thought.
Yeah. What did you think it was?
I didn't think that was a hashtag. I thought it was a pound. Pound Africa. I don't think that's the message you're going for.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh brother.
Yeah.
See, when you wear that around, you got to be careful. You got to be careful because you never know what response people are going to think. That could mean all sorts of things to different people depending on who you're engaging.
Absolutely, and I've actually prepared myself for that, and then my first response will be, "I'm African. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yep. So.
Well, we'll leave it at that.
That's right. Oh, nice. All right, so.
Where's Craig? Oh, because let me just.
Oh, Craig. Always something with you, Craig. Seriously.
Oh,
Good.
we missed him saying recording. That's sad.
Not
this time around.
Wah wah. Okay, so what do you want to talk about?
So I read a really interesting article. It's sort of in the vein of some of our previous conversations. Uber has decided to you remember those little e-bikes that you saw close to your office?
Oh yeah. The scooters. The
scooters.
Yeah. And the bikes. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So, Uber has just decided that it's going to be too expensive to recycle them or give them away. So, they've just decided to throw them in the dump.
What?
Yeah. So I'm reading an article.
Wait, why are they not using them anymore?
So let me see here. So according to the Next Web, and they say according to The Verge, Uber confirmed in a statement that it would be recycling many of Jump's older e-bike scooter models after transferring them to the newer models.
Jump. Okay.
But instead, that's not what's happening. They have decided that just throwing them in scrap yards in Seattle and North Carolina, Carolina, there we go, would be easier and cheaper than trying to recycle them or get them retrofitted for the Uber brand. So
wow.
Yeah, so they said here in a statement by Fast Company, an Uber spokesperson said the company did explore donating the remaining bikes, but said there were too many issues with maintenance, liability, safety, and lack of consumer charging equipment. So they just decided, why give these bikes to people who need bikes? We'll just throw them away.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Good. So you want to rage against the machine with them?
I just think, it comes back to the question, some of the questions we've raised in previous podcasts around what is the obligation of those who create tech to steward tech and the environment.
Yeah, good.
So I thought that would be interesting in that vein. And let me see.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the George Floyd thing, and particularly as we have all these protests going on.
Yeah,
you're shaking your head like, oh, dude. But well, all these protests are going on. I want to know why there isn't a better implementation of technology, which could be a better rational guard of, of people's liberties potentially than the National Guard. And so, I think that's a conversation to have. I mean, because there's all sorts we have all this like surveillance equipment, drone equipment. There's all this military tech that could be used in very peaceable ways, and it's not being used.
Absolutely.
And that's because I think we've had a failure to invest in technology. So I think we could talk about that too. That'd be another good one.
Yeah. And on a side note, did you watch the documentary on Netflix, Waco?
No, I have not. I know how it ends though.
Yeah. Well, that's up for debate.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true, I guess.
But I mean, that's part of the conversation, I guess, is, that there might be reasons why, I guess, people are not investing in certain technologies because it just doesn't help further peaceful narratives.
We'll say more about that
right now or in the podcast.
in the podcast.
Yeah, I'll think about how I can position
this segment
that.
Sponsored by the Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah. Pound Africa. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. That's great. All right, good.
That's what happens when you're old and you see pound instead of hashtag.
Like, wow. I've never heard someone intentionally make that mistake. That's really funny. Oh, man. All right, let me do this. I'm going to get Craig to rejoin us just one more time.
Who opened the last one? You, me?
I did. So
My turn? Okay.
You can roll with it.
So tell me when. We don't do the music, right? I'm trying to remember. We just start, and then you throw the music. Then you put the music in afterwards. Actually, you should send me the music, though, because I could do that on this.
Okay.
So we could, in the future, we could have a little intro, and then we could literally roll out of the thing, which would be pretty fun. See, people are seeing all the behind the scene things. So
love it.
When Joe Rogan's coming to us and begging to do our podcast and push his supplements on our show, then hey man, Joe Rogan likes tech. I'll give him that. Like, Joe Rogan had Elon Musk on twice, so I'll give him that. So
yeah,
and I still want to talk about. We haven't talked about. I still want to talk about neural nets. We're not going to get there today. Neural nets and what else? I don't know, but I got to do this in the next hour because if I don't walk before then, there's a curfew at 8:00 now in Miami. So.
Well, that's perfect because I have to go pick up a couch at 6:10. So.
Okay, all right. So let's do this. Okay, so ready? You tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Hey, welcome everybody to the SuperPosition podcast. I'm Christopher Bennick, and I'm here with my co-host Duncan Platt. How are you doing, Duncan?
I'm doing really well, Christopher. How are you doing?
I am doing as well as can be expected, all things considered. Everything is just crazy right now in the world. It is just, everything seems to be turned upside down, and just a real interesting time to kind of watch how society's pivoting with all of the tension that is surrounding all sorts of things. And so,
Absolutely.
what's kind of been your observation in the last week of things that have been going on? What have you seen that has really drawn your attention?
Maybe I'll turn that back into a question for you. You're a reverend, right?
Yeah, yes.
All right.
That's a setup if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. The next part's not going to be great. Um, well, maybe you can tell us which horse of the apocalypse we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. Actually, what I think's happening, I think it is really like it's really easy for people to kind of go, there's the old ministry illustration about we have our hand too close in front of our face and we have to pull it away so we can see better, right? And so that gets some perspective. And I think it's really easy when we're in the moment to think that, man, everything is terrible. Sure. But I think, if we have some understanding that Christ has started a redemptive process and those redemptive purposes are enacted through the Holy Spirit, which we had Pentecost going on today, right? So, so if we think about that and it's enacted through us, then it makes sense that there would actually be tension and conflict as we kind of sort things out and help to redeem and renew things. So, there's obviously good and bad extremes to all this stuff. It's not great that when somebody has a shop they've spent their life pouring into, putting money into, and then it gets torched. That's obviously not good. We would not be encouraging that. On the flip side of it, there aren't opportunities for people to express the rage that they feel from institutional oppression. And I think that when we see these riots happening, what we're seeing, Martin Luther King talked about it being an expression of the unheard voice, right? And so I think we see that happening, and I actually think it's good that it's being heard. We may not like the way that it's being expressed in some ways because people might take it further than we would hope they would. But I think we need to be able to express those disenfranchised positions and have places for that to happen. And quite frankly, when injustice is happening, if the government's not going to respond to it, then it seems reasonable to me that people are going to try to have a response that the government will pay attention to. So while we want to obviously encourage that to be an aggressive, nonviolent response, I think it's reasonable to see at least the pattern that's happening where we're working towards those redemptive purposes. So, and even with the COVID thing, does anyone like being locked in their house forever? No, but I think if you kind of look at it, you take the hand away from our face, like now we actually have the most concerted effort in the history of humanity to work on finding a cure for a virus. So if we find this immediacy for viral issues in the future, right, we're going to actually do a bunch of preventative stuff that we would hope at this point. We're actually going to set up some organizations that can help to deal with these things in the future. And so I think it's actually what we're doing is we're actually kind of working the kinks out of this to say, okay, so yeah, this isn't great this time, but how are we going to do it? So, and it's kind of like exercise, right? It's like the first time you do it, not so great, doesn't feel so great afterwards. The more you do it, the easier it gets to the point where it actually feels life-giving. And so, I think we see that in all these things. So for us to be too dystopian about it, I don't know. I mean, that's not my take, but I can understand how, without a theological perspective of it, the average Joe wakes up and they go, oh my gosh, what now? There's murder hornets all over my front yard. What am I going to do? And so I don't know, but I think the perspective helped. I will say though, it's crazy because think about how quickly some of this stuff has happened. I mean, in just a couple days, we went from people being mad to people organizing. In Miami here, they shut down protesters shut down Route 95. So like, the highway that runs all the way up, into New York state, they shut down. I mean, it was stopped traffic here. So crazy stuff, but you can totally understand why people are upset. And I also think it's one of those things where Christians have to really. I don't think we can sit back and act like this doesn't matter. I don't know if you saw the article in Christianity Today about George Floyd and all the ministry he did in Houston, but he actually did all this stuff in the Third Ward in Houston. And so really great article to check out. And so like if that doesn't really irritate Christians on a high level, then I don't know what it's going to take. So it's and the other thing is to say, well, what is reasonable for us to, as points of action, what is reasonable for people to do, right? And so because different people have different ways and different gifts that they can actually impact this. So it may not be the most reasonable thing for everyone to be on the street protesting. That may not be the most helpful. Somebody may have the gift of being able to write eloquently, and that spending the time doing that can actually kind of move things forward in a positive way. So there's accountability and protection, and then, help people to be heard. But it's obviously there's no real question that there's a systemic issue that just has failed to be addressed. And the question I'll have is, 2 months from now, how will things be different? And I think that's the larger question. What's the actual systemic implementation that's going to happen? And that kind of leads me into something I was interested in talking about today, is to say, how do we look at maybe how technology could actually impact that? So, there's a lot of drone technology. There is, you remember when the Las Vegas shooting happened? There's so many shootings in the United States, I think people forget. But in the Las Vegas shooting, there was a guy who was a sniper, and somebody I know wrote an article about, well, why didn't they have drone technology essentially just flying in that space to be able to identify and eliminate risks when somebody is just taking people out? And my question is there not technology, that could be implemented in a way that would be helpful to take out the emotional response that's happening, or is it better to have the emotional response of the officers there? Because it was really interesting to me to see before things yesterday, for example, there were things kind of got violent in Miami, and they put a curfew over the city, but before that, there were police officers who were essentially saying, "Hey, we're laying down our arms and going to do this with you," right? And so my question is, does it allow people, having that tech allow people to actually participate, or does it actually kill the relational piece right now that's actually needed? I mean, is that bonding necessary? It seems in some places, where cops are shooting rubber bullets at people for, what looks like no good reason. Maybe there is, but looks like no good reason. It seems like it could take the emotional negativity out of it. But maybe that's something we need to work through. I don't know. What would you think about if we had drones, or if we had I've seen sound technology, for example, that can be used to essentially repel people. So what would you think about different uses of technology? Maybe those robotic dogs. I've seen those robotic dogs enforcing social distancing at parks. Sure. Now I also saw Black Mirror. So so I don't know, but I think there's, because you can go real quick to like, oh, RoboCop, that's a problem, right? Like, or Terminator scenario. But are there potential positive uses of tech that could actually help in these kind of riot situations?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm just thinking about, some of the tweets that had been fired back and forth over the last couple of days on Twitter, and one of them stuck out to me that I found really interesting, and I decided to dig into it. And it was a tweet by Donald Trump about protesters outside the White House who are increasingly becoming more aggressive and agitated. And so he signed off the tweet by it seemed like he was warning protesters not to jump over the fence because they had what he called ominous technology or ominous weapons. And so I was intrigued by that. So I thought, I wonder what that means. What are ominous weapons?
Yeah.
And so I dug into that a little bit to get a better perspective and a better understanding. And it turns out there are some interesting, at least known interesting weapons that are employed within the perimeter of the White House. And some of them have been used in riot situations or crowd management. And so one of them is at least from what I could glean, and I don't know if all of this is accurate or not. I don't know if much of this is published or not, but the one was apparently a microwave weapon that shoots a microwave ray at protesters that makes them feel like their skin is on fire, but doesn't
Now, if you have
necessarily
a bag of popcorn, will it? I'm just asking. Could guard yourself with giant bags of Orville Redenbacher.
There we go. That's something worth testing. So
Yeah.
I'll make a note.
Yeah. So these are not normal, like, no one has got their GE microwave out front. Like, that's not going to deter
They
anybody.
run around with them open. The doors open.
Yeah.
And they, high power. But they they have these.
Someone wrote in the stream chat, "Bring your hot pockets."
There we go.
So yeah, awesome.
Hot pockets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, I mean, it might feel like you're dying, but at least you can enjoy a treat while you do that.
That's right. That's right.
So that's one of the mechanisms apparently that they use, and it's non-lethal. Up to a point, I'm sure, but it's non-lethal. The other thing that they use is I've heard of these where they point an audio gun and it disrupts your middle ear and it makes you nauseous.
Well, that's why I wonder. I mean, it's like we're shooting tear gas at people, right? So it's like that's already a form of technology, right?
Yeah,
I mean, guys have riot gear on, which is form of technology. So isn't there kind of a more elevated version of this where it's like, look, if you use that microwave version, it feels terrible, but there's like a line that you're just not going to be able to cross, and it kind of creates a fence, and it just says, look, we're going to make sure that we do that. I wonder if that seems less intimidating than having 12 police officers lining up across a road in riot gear, because that image actually, I think, sparks certain things in people, but I wonder if there's a deeper concern there too, because it could be that maybe that image sparks something in people, but maybe the image of nothing sparks something worse. Like maybe it feels like an unseen power, or like one thing I've seen in like contemporary Christian conversations is there is a lot of like unfounded conspiracy theory going on. People who like have zero appreciation apparently of the science behind the things that they're suggesting. And I just think we've got to kind of change a culture of saying, okay, so what is acceptable uses of technology and what is because on the flip side, I've seen some of these folks who have been recording the riots, and they have actually been showing what's going on with the riots, and they're using all sorts of social media to do that. And so there's like all of a sudden there goes from 0 to 50,000 people watching riot going on. And a couple of these places, they actually are taking mics out and asking people how they're doing. So they're using the tech in that way. And I would imagine that people are going to start. I mean, if you look at, if you look at some of the stuff that happened in like Egypt, right? Think of how social media was used in that context. I mean, it was like to scale. People
it was pivotal.
Yeah, and so it kind of goes back. I mean, we talked about before, like the Minecraft library, right? But there's kind of levels of subversion that people can have, and I would think there's also levels of order that could be created. I guess the question becomes, do you trust, if the issue is we have police officers that we don't trust, does having better tech help the ultimate issue or not? Because the issue then, is it really a tech issue or is it just a people issue at that point? And unless I think you can show some demonstrables as to how the tech is leveling the playing field, and it can be there's transparency and clearly articulated, how this is being monitored. And then I guess the question is are people are they so distrustworthy at this point and so anti-science and tech on certain things that they would believe it even if the evidence is there? Does the evidence actually matter to folks at some point?
So I think, just the two things that I think are relevant to that point. I read an interesting article this week as well, and I, as you're talking about it, some of those elements jump out. What's interesting is, we think about Facebook being this catalyst for bringing people together, for connecting people to a cause, for catalyzing initiatives or movements, and then creating velocity behind that. And it's interesting. I read an article on Business Insider, and I'm, just looking at the data here. They say they did a report in 2016 to try and understand how Facebook based certain recommendations on the platform on users' behavior, and I mean, you've written about this, Chris, just the impact of creating discord on Facebook and how it's beneficial to the platform to have algorithms that drive that. But what they found was, in this 2016 report, that 64% of all extremist group joins are due to their own recommendation tools. So more than half of people joining groups with radical or extreme perspectives find that group because Facebook is luring them into those conversations. And so it's really interesting to see that on the one hand, Facebook has the potential and the breadth to be a solution in times of challenge, but at the same time, it also, I think, it's sort of like a what do you call those, where you have a counterweight and a weight. As much as it adds weight to the movement and velocity to the movement, it potentially creates issues as well. And just thinking about this scenario right now as we think about George Floyd, I read some interesting things come out last night, and I saw an article by Washington Post this morning quoting the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and the mayor. Let me just quickly get his Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, both pointing to the fact that there is a lot of radical white supremacist organizations behind a lot of the looting and violence as well. So we see this one side that you're talking about, people going to the streets, protesting, really upset about George Floyd. What they're doing, I can't comment if that's good or bad. I don't know, we don't know who's doing what at this point yet. But there is activity and momentum and velocity, and we see social media driving a lot of that. And at the same time, we see almost a counterweight in that process seeking to create more chaos,
right,
with white supremacist neo-Nazi organizations trying to stoke the fire And how they found out about this is also through Facebook groups. And so it's just interesting, you know.
Well, and then it becomes interesting even more than that. I mean, because Donald Trump was told this week by Twitter that they weren't going to allow him to essentially stoke the fires, right? So
Right.
of this, as far as his verbiage towards, I forget what the exact, you know,
A call to violence.
yeah, it's something like when the rioting starts,
Oh, when the looting starts, the shooting
there
starts.
it is. Yeah, the looting starts. So this is like a throwback to old, like one, pretty unthoughtful by the president to do that, since it's kind of a throwback to segregation verbiage, whether he's aware of that or not. But then essentially, you know, they were saying, well, which I actually thought, to your point, the ominous weapons quote was a lot worse, actually. You know what I mean? But but
I was intrigued.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
I was like,
It's
tell me more.
Okay, you told us earlier in the pandemic that there's aliens. So
Yeah.
maybe you have some, like, you know, phasers set to stun or something. We have no idea. But but the challenge becomes like, okay, so who gets a voice and why? And does anybody get a voice? And I think this becomes this really interesting situation, because like, and I've written about this quite a bit in other places, but I think when you have a social media page, for example, you should be able to block, delete, do whatever you want to do to maintain your page. I do not believe if someone comes onto it's like someone coming to my home. If you do something at my home and I don't like it, I can tell you to get out. And darn it, you better get out, or I'll enforce you getting out, right? And so I think it's the same thing with social media to some extent. I ought to be able to have a certain level of autonomy about what I'm allowed to do and say. Now, the question is when that starts to have an adverse effect on other people, does Facebook and Twitter and whatever have the authority to say, you know what, this is our platform, and so with all due respect, we know? Or is at some point, is it kind of like when you're a celebrity and you know, you lose your freedom because you're a celebrity, and then you have a responsibility to the general public? If your tech organization becomes big enough, do you have a responsibility then to the general public to say, well, actually, like, you know, the rules are a little different now, because now we're beyond just being a private organization. Now we are actually a catalyst for social change, which I don't think there's any question after, you know, what we saw happen in Egypt. That is a fact, right? Like, Twitter is an agent for social change. Social media can be an agent for social change. And I think it's great that people are leveraging it that way. I think that's a positive. I think as Christians, that's one thing that we recognize, where it's like, that's Christ's redemptive purposes in action, right? We're using the tech, this kind of theological or argument that I've made prior, where everything is divine technology, right? That's us stewarding that for good. But at the same time, we recognize that it can be stewarded in other direction. And so then at some point it comes down to, like, what are the foundational principles on which Facebook and Twitter get to make these decisions, and do they get to make those decisions? And this is what Trump is actually, like, you know, he's kind of puffed back up this week and said, you don't get to do this. And I'm gonna. Now the challenge is, you know, you can only say I'm gonna so many times and then not actually do something, and people start to go, well, come on, let's see what you got. You know, it's a little bit of the boy who cried wolf, right? But I do think there is an argument to be made about, okay, what is the discussion to be had about what are the rights and privileges of companies and of governments as it pertains to society as we use this technology, because so we're doing this. I mean, it's the first time we've done this on Twitch, right? And so you know, the State of the Union address was on Twitch. It was on Twitch. And so what point, I mean, Twitch has pretty strict you know, rules that they will enforce, but I think people on Twitch would say they are arbitrarily enforced. Sometimes there is a judgment call that is made, and the kind of the mass of people may go, yeah, we don't agree with that, and Twitch is kind of like, yeah, we don't care. This is our company, and if you don't like it, get out of here. So where is that? This becomes this kind of free market and government, battle, where we really are talking about freedom. We really are talking about it, and where do we have the right to impose technology? I think the part of why I got into this about the riot piece is I think we're naive if we think that technology isn't already being used. It's a question of, is the visual piece of it, do we like it when we don't see it as much? Does it feel a little better to us when we don't see it? And I think that's because we don't have a very good hermeneutic for understanding technology. But when we actually see it, when it's out there, when it's large and in charge, then it becomes one of these things where it's like, okay, well, is this really, is this tech good for us or is it bad for us? Is it ominous tech, or is it something else? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's worthy of a conversation. I would be fascinating to me if in the middle of this, if you're the head of the National Guard and you're going in and you're just trying to maintain safety, you're trying to make sure buildings don't get set on fire and looted, right? Which I think is that's a reasonable expectation. I don't think anybody who would say, look at whoever the head of the National Guard is, would say that's unreasonable for them to do those things. We would see that as part of their office. If they were to roll out some new technology, like if they rolled out those Black Mirror-style dogs and they all had tasers on the end of them, and they could literally run and chase people down and tase them if they got to a certain point, or they could cuff somebody or some whatever. You know what I mean? You've seen these robots run, right? They're something special. Nightmares are made of, right? But if they open that up, what would be the response to that tech now? And I would dare say that people would flip out because of the emotional context of what's happening. Whereas in England or wherever it was before, there have been these articles about these dogs, these robotic dogs being the social distance arbiters in parks. So it's already happening. It's totally already happening. But it's the context of when and how it's rolled out, how we see it as acceptable, really matters.
I think, just speaking about the dogs, that's I can maybe speak from a South African perspective in that, thinking back on the apartheid years and the brutality of the police and the absolute disregard for human life when they responded to riots and uprisings, and they would use dogs in that, and the dogs would go berserk. They would maim people for life. And so in the South African context, while we still use dogs in the police force, or they use dogs in the police force, got to be accurate now. Yeah. It's very rarely used in protests because of the emotional weight that carries. You're sending a certain message, and I think the same happens here. If it's a real dog or not, if it's a robotic dog or a real dog, it's almost the emotional baggage around that might be part of the challenge. So just thinking about using tech like that moving forward. But another part of it, I think, that makes it really challenging is, and I touched briefly on this in a conversation prior, is I watched the Netflix, it's not a Netflix show, but it's on Netflix now, the Waco, Texas mini docu-series. Yeah. And really, really fascinating. Not really knowing the story, being able to be exposed to that in this 6-part episode rendition. But one of the characters in the story, a FBI agent, Gary Nesner, one of the senior guys in the FBI's negotiation team, sort of builds a case in this novel, which is, or in this TV show, which is based on his book about the same situation. And his what he infers in the process, and sometimes very blatantly, is that there is this tension between peaceful resolution, where everyone gets to one, and just going in with force and silencing those who oppose the status quo. And I think that, using technology, if you use technology in a subtle way to try solve problems, nobody cares. But the moment you use technology to drown out dissent and get people to, if you force people to be quiet through violence, the reaction will just never be positive. And so I think, talking about the dogs with stun guns.
But what if you force people to be quiet through regulation? Is that fundamentally better or different? Because I really appreciate the context that you gave, particularly in South Africa. Like, I think that's, like, as we look at technology and we look how we implement it, I think one of the really important things is to understand that, something that we might implement in the United States might be viewed totally different in, China or Japan because of cultural sensitivities, right? And we don't always think about that. We just think, oh, it's great because it fits our need. But in a globalized world, it doesn't always fit our need. But then, in addition to it, we really have a situation where when we look at how these things are implemented, we're seeing a violent response that's happening, and I think that's coming out. That violent response is coming because for so long things have not changed. People do not feel heard. And people, and in some ways, I personally, as somebody who works for the church, I blame the church for not doing enough on this, because the church talks this talk, but doesn't continue to advocate systemic ways that this has to be changed enough, in my opinion. This ought to be our wheelhouse. If the church is not advocating for the marginalized, for the disenfranchised, then what the heck are we doing? I just think we have a pretty poor read on the Gospels if it's just like, hey, let's just be comfortable and not do anything about anything. So that means, we have to be willing to risk ourselves. But I do think there's a big difference emotionally, but I don't know that there's actually a big difference practically between the use of force and violence and the to silence people and the use of force and regulation to silence people, because it can have the same effect. Like you can have something violent happen to you, and it's kind of like, even if you're in a fight, like sometimes if you're in a fight, you can come out of that fight at least feeling like, well, you know what, I've tried. You know what I mean? Even if you don't win, you feel like, man, I put my all into it. If you're regulated to death, you're just made impotent. Right? You are unable to fight at all at that point. You are unable to, you are it's like you're just cuffed. And so it becomes interesting because we say, well, that regulation is needed. And I don't think any of us would argue things should be, relatively decent and in order, right? But at the same time, regulation can also stifle people to the point where they want to fight. And it creates a visceral reaction. And I think it's ironic to me that what we're seeing happening in the streets right now, we just saw a version of it happen to the president, and he had the same response. Oh, yeah? I'm going to fight you. You're going to silence me. I'm going to fight you. And I look at him and go, what do you think's going on in the streets right now? Like, it's the same thing.
That's interesting.
You just don't see that it's happening, and it's just being made manifest in a different thing. So I think it's a very human reaction for us to, you know what I mean? And I don't know that I have a good answer for this. And, surprise, in our 45-minute podcast, we didn't find the solution that the world's been dealing with for forever. But
I, for one, am disappointed.
Yeah. Hey, we still have time. We still have a few minutes. But but I do think it's a natural response for us to see this happening from people, for people to, to be, to kind of be indignant about the fact that, wait a second, you're taking my right away, or you're taking my life away, or you're taking my livelihood away, or you're taking my, and for us to not acknowledge those things. I mean, even in the pandemic, right? Like, science is telling us one thing. At the same time, a lot of people are like, man, my livelihood is, I don't have my livelihood, and look at what this is doing to me. For us to not acknowledge the livelihood piece is as inhumane, you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? And I'm not saying open everything up, but I am saying we need to at least develop a way to lament with one another. And I think the Christian tradition has something profound to say about that. And I also think when we look at regulation in technology, or regulation in either in ways that feel that are more digital or more physical, I think that when we look at those things, we also need to talk about how do we actually lament in those scenarios as well, when something happens where we feel like injustice has happened, because I think that's the heart of it. And again, I think it's really ironic that our president is like, this is unjust. And it's like, and then days later, the United States is on fire, literally saying this is unjust. And so us figuring out what are those uses, I'm amazed that there, and maybe there are, and I don't know about it, but it seems to me that there aren't, at least publicly, task force that talk about this in community, about the proper use of technology and its regulation. It seems like everything that comes up is just a contextual thing, and it's addressed in city government, and then the next thing comes. But there's never actually any visioning. It's always this, and we've talked about this before with Kevin Kelly's Technium, but it's always like we're reacting to the tech instead of actually developing a plan to say, okay, how do we do that? And maybe that's because we would have to have enough people on board from an ethical standpoint to say, we believe it's important enough that our technology should have a plan because of how it's going to impact society. And so we will submit to that within certain parameters that doesn't lose our creative identity or doesn't kill our profitability, but does protect people and look out for people's general welfare. So I think those are things that we have to consider, at least as we get into this, and it's obviously a deeper conversation, but it's fascinating how it's playing out right now.
I think it's the right conversation, and I think, part of the challenge is putting together a framework that makes that profitable. Because part of the challenge is just thinking about some of the most valuable technologies for us as consumers, be it a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter, or you can mention any household technology brand, and they all make money on things that if we spent some time thinking about it, we would have some deep, heavy questions about. And for them to pivot their offering or their solution or their creative expression is just not going to be nearly as profitable as sowing discord online or collecting every single conversation we ever have. But I think there is a hope for a future where that is possible. I just don't know how we back into that with what we have right now.
Well, I think some of it is, right now, the things that I've seen that have been hopeful are that there is a sense where people are understanding it's not just enough for, us to sit back and not say anything. It's not just enough for us to not do anything. And and some of the things that have actually been the most hopeful to me are actually watching some of the police officers in some of these cities say, you know what, we're not on another side of this. Like, there's not a division between us. We have a job, but we are unified in this, and we're not gonna accept bad examples as being the standard, because that's not the standard. And so that's been helpful to see that coming out and those stories coming out. I don't know if you saw in I think in Minneapolis where they had people, they invited people to bring a broom to help clean up the looting, and it was like there's like pictures of like hundreds of people who showed up with brooms to like clean the streets up. Like, that to me is a creation care mentality that gives you hope that in spite of this stuff. And so even if there are fringe groups, even if there are people who go too far in these scenarios, there's hope that there are more people who are willing to say, you know what, we understand what you did last night and why you did it, but there's a better way, and let's figure this out together. But we're not going to leave you when you stop doing that. This is just the beginning of the conversation. This is just the start of this. We're not gonna put these brooms away and then not think about it again. And I think those become kind of those points where we see the redemptive purposes of Christ actually being enacted in the world. And while it may feel uncomfortable right now, it provides us hope long term.
You know what I think just in that, thinking about the brooms, and fundamentally I believe and I know that the majority of people are good, and the majority of people love and want a peaceful future for everyone. But the challenges we so often hear from that small group of people that are so vocal. And again, I saw that in growing up in South Africa, seeing rapid changes in politics, rapid changes in the landscape in terms of how a country is governed radically. I mean, we went from being one country to birthing into another, literally a new country. And over that period of time, we just saw so many shifts happening, and we started realizing there was this militant political movement that was just out to eliminate a certain race of people in South Africa. And then another group rose that wanted to eliminate the other race of people in South Africa. And you look at this from the outside and you're like, this country is nuts. These people are crazy. And then you start spending time and you realize, oh, it's a fringe group of 30 people and they're dominating the news. And I think that's part of the challenge is technology, because it's become such an equal, flat playing field, and because we've developed algorithms for people to connect to content that creates emotion, we look at things and we think there's discord and dissonance and disruption and there's hatred. While I think the truth is not necessarily
it's Westboro Baptist looks a lot bigger than they actually are, right? Like, exactly. I mean, everybody's like, oh my gosh, these people are everywhere. It's like, no, they're not. They're in like two different places and they're carpooling. And, it's like they just got done with their, clown college course before they got, whatever it's just this weird perception that we have. The only thing I would argue with your statement would be, my Calvinist friends would say none of us are good. But through the Holy Spirit, we have a chance, and our hearts are desiring to be good. And so we're working through that. So, but I,
this is a podcast for everyone, so I'll just keep that. I'll just keep my response to myself.
That's right. That's hilarious. So anyhow, but I'm just playing, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where I do think the vast majority of people, they want the right thing. They might not know what the right thing is, but keeping that hope alive. And I've actually been encouraged to see how many people have stepped out of their comfort zones on this.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that there's still not things that need to be fixed. There definitely are, and that is the case with people as well. But But I think it's moving us down kind of the field. So hopefully, ultimately, one day, the issues that we're dealing with today will not be issues that our children or our children's children have to deal with. So, well, with all of that, I think we've covered a lot more, and we always cover a lot more in a lot different direction than I think we're gonna go. But that's kind of the nature of this thing, and so.
I love it.
But with that, we'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll be back on Twitch as well. So if people want to, people are on Twitch. If you're looking for this, you can look my name up, Christopher Bennick, and you'll be able to find us on Twitch if you want to see us. And we'll put a schedule up as to when we're gonna meet, if we can figure that out, because sometimes that's just hard for us to figure out. But we're trying to be there once a week and be consistent with that. And so with that, we'll wish you farewell and stay safe and keep advocating for those redemptive purposes in the world. Take care, everybody.
Great.
All right, good. I was sorry at the end. I was getting a little, my platforms were getting screwed up. So what I was going to actually say is if people are watching this from Twitch, how do they see the podcast? And what it realized to me is, wait, if they're listening to the podcast, then they already know how to get to the podcast. But if they're listening to us on Twitch, they might not know how to get to the podcast.
That's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny. All right, everybody watching and listening right now, go to your preferred podcast platform. That could be Spotify, that could be Apple Podcasts, that could be Google Play or Google Music, or if you're using iHeart Podcasts, you can get it from there or from Stitcher, I think. And all you do is you search for SuperPosition or Christopher Bennick or Duncan Platt, and you should find it there.
Nice.
As simple as that.
Easy.
I love it when there's more platforms than steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Awkward.
Nice. All right, man. Well, what do you have anything exciting going on today?
I have to go pick up a couch. And then I'm seeing my father-in-law.
Nice.
How about you?
We're going for a walk, and we're going to try to get it in before curfew happens. So.
How long is your walk?
I usually walk about 5 miles a day. I walk 10,000 steps every day since the beginning of the year. So.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, it's. There's days I gotta admit I don't want to do it, but I need to do it. So, and it's good. It's been good. Like I'm somebody who. I am not like a hey sit still and pray person. I'm a walk and pray person. And so it's actually helpful for me to do that. I also have, I take a lot of phone calls. Like I pace when I'm in like doing a phone call. So
me too.
It's just kind of the nature of what I am. So I might as well actually be going somewhere, I guess, you know what I mean? Or pretending like I'm exercising. So, it's not like high, I'm not out there doing high cardio or something. It's just getting out, exercising.
Speed walking.
But yeah, it's one of those, I don't even speed walk. I just kind of meander, but I make sure I get 10,000 steps. So
and that's about 8,500 more than I do. So,
well, in quarantine, I find it really hard because I can walk pretty much from my bedroom to my computer and sit here and then walk until I get something to eat and then walk back. And then by the end of the day, it's like, hey, I walk like 600 steps a day, and I ended up right where I started. So
that's funny. Yeah.
So anyhow,
that's great.
It's just one of those things. But yeah. So all right, man. Well, have fun. Good luck getting the couch. So is the couch going to your house or is it going somewhere else? I didn't catch that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's going to our house. My parents-in-law are moving to Georgia as well.
Oh, okay.
And so we are inheriting a couch.
Nice.
So we're.
Well,
we're
I bet you'll inherit
pick that
something
up.
else before it's all said and done. You watch. That's typically how moving works.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that didn't go in the truck. Here, you want this? So,
yeah.
It doesn't fit anymore. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
So
Yeah, and
so as
then,
you're moving your piano later.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Oh, goodness. And with that, on a side note to the 3 people watching out there
Yes.
and those watching later, I hope to catch you for a game of Borderlands.
Yeah, when do you want to do that?
Maybe tomorrow or Tuesday's a little rough. Maybe Wednesday.
Wednesday's a great day for me to do that.
Wonderful. All right.
So yeah,
We can bring the same high caliber of wit that you have come to expect in this episode, and really contextual insights.
Yeah. Well, we can really talk about Borderland security.
There we go. Yes, they have very ominous weapons.
Ominous weapons, and they have dogs. There's dogs in that.
Yes,
they have ominous dogs. So anyhow. All right, man. Well, good luck with your couch endeavors, and
Thank you.
To folks who are watching and who will watch in the future, thanks for being with us. See you later, man. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.